What do you consider the American soul? This is somewhat of a loaded question, since the answer can reveal a lot about a person. Like, some might have a reverence for the Old West and the freedom of rugged individualism that has been mythologized in the media, with the tales of the Lone Ranger and the current popularity of games like Red Dead Redemption. But some might also long for the nostalgia of Midwestern Americana of the 50s, and Talking Heads need no introduction. The post-punk band from New York has had a massive influence on not only their own scene, but on the musical landscape as a whole. From the claustrophobic, punky rhythm of Psycho Killer, the new wave sound of Once in a Lifetime, to even the more funk-driven grooves of Speaking in Tongues. The Talking Heads was always willing to prove their musical prowess. They were all brought together by the ringleader, the patron saint of groove, the autistic pipe piper, the eccentric David Byrne. Now, much has been said about Byrne's specific brand of perfectionism and difficulty to work with. Now, we don't want to paint Byrne as an asshole or discredit the other band members in an ill-cited attempt to defend him as an artist. This isn't a hit piece exposing him as a person, or a defense of some of his more unsavory behaviors. You're not going to see me try to paint Tina as an ableist for some of her statements on Burns and his diagnosis. Neither will this be a history lesson on the band. I'm just going to give a basic context to the events that lead up to the production of the film for the uninitiated. This video is more geared towards people who have an interest in the film and wondering if they would want to give it a watch. The spoilers will be kept at a minimum. Not that there's much to spoil. This movie is way more interested in exploring its weird world and characters than trying to come to an overarching plot. Not that that's a bad thing. Some of my favorite films have very simple to almost non-existent plots, feel more true to life, because not everyone is destined to do great things, and sometimes it's good to just sit back and observe the strangeness around you. Really soak it all in. It's a lot like Napoleon Dynamite in that way. This is really just an excuse to talk about the Talking Heads and their eccentric frontman. So if you're already a fan, don't burn down the house, because this might be the place you want to be. So sit back and relax as we explore the bizarrely beautiful film. The Talking Heads have always had a flavor for video. From the iconic fun of the Once in a Lifetime video, which was shot on a shoestring budget, to a mixed media and psychedelic visuals of There She Was and Road to Nowhere. It was this experience with crafting innovative music videos that led to David Byrne wanting to make a feature-length film of his own. When asked why he wanted to make this film, he said, "I directed some of the band's videos, and those did fairly well. It was a time when MTV was fairly new, and they were hungry for content. Unless it was incredibly bad or obscene, they would just start playing it almost immediately, so that was exciting. And just like music, you can throw your visual ideas in front of the public and see what would stick." David was inspired by tabloid newspapers and decided on the name True Stories. In a Rolling Stone review back in 2018, he elaborated on this inspiration. Yeah, they were all from Wiki World News. They weren't really in the National Enquirer. They seem to be kind of like that BuzzFeed might do, where they lack a legitimate human interest news story and give it a more interesting title, and they would catch your eye. I just kept those. In the same interview, he explained how he wrote a script based on it. "I didn't start with stories, I started with images. I started with a big wall full of picked drawings and images, and I would order and reorder them until they would be a flow to them. It was a picture of people singing, drawings of their Texas landscape. As my wife and I were collecting the Wiki World News, I was grabbing articles and going, well, maybe one of these people could be this. Maybe one of those people in the drawings could be this person." It slowly evolved into having a through line, even though it's not a conventional narrative. There were some critics who raised concern about how Texans would react to the portrayal of the film. Byrne said that he picked the rural setting because he wanted to showcase the creativity and imagination of small-town life.
I'm sure some people, when they see it, they'll wonder, well, what's his attitude towards this? And my attitude was I really liked everybody I met here. And some of the stuff that people were doing was kind of funny and kind of kooky. But I think that was on purpose. Some of the stuff that I saw in parades, there was a a parade, and there's a group in Plano that it's businessmen and they push lawnmowers in the 4th of July parade. And come on, they're not really serious. They're having a good time, and we're supposed to laugh. It's that kind of humor.
In the Rolling Stone interview, he said, "I'd get out a little bit. It was before I started biking around every town I went through. More often friends would say, 'Well, David, come on, there's something really cool you should see. We'll take you.' So when there was time, we would make a little field trip to see it. We decided to film the movie in Texas because investors were interested in the state right to work anti-union laws." In an interview, he said, I was first lured there for financial reasons because it was a right-to-work state and they had experienced crews in the studio near Dallas. Now, I don't want to paint Byrne as some cruel businessman or anything he probably wasn't, even anti-union. It was purely a financial decision based on investors. Besides, he wouldn't have got such a unique, vibrant setting if he hadn't in this location. Anyway. Again, this isn't to pass judgment on a man I don't even know. I'm purely interested in exploring his work in a way that is respectful to his vision. Byrne had already had some experience with feature films, working with Silence of the Lambs director, the late Jonathan Demme, on his film, on the Talking Heads concert film, Stop Making Sense. Working with Jonathan on Stop Making Sense was great because he was a director, but he was very generous in that he invented us into the editing suite. I think partially for practical reasons, we knew the show, so we would say, perceptionist Steve Scales, come in right here. That's the shot you need to go to. Or the girls Lynn and are whipping their hair dance right there. That's what you want to see. Maybe we would make things go a little bit faster than him. And the editor tediously looking at anything. Working with Jonathan got me over my fear of playing in the big sandbox. A lot of my videos were shot on 16mm, so 35mm seemed like a grown-up medium at the time. I was fascinated by how movies were made, technically, and how editing worked, so after working with them, I thought, well, time to try it. And of course, I wanted to do something that was different than what was out there. I thought, I don't follow the rules of music, so I'm not going to make a conventional movie. I'm going to see if I can make something that, similar to the music I do, can reach a public on its own terms. The film opened to a box office of $2.5 million, barely making its budget, but even though it was a box office disappointment, it became a cult classic, with TV airings growing its fan base. When asked how he feels about the film now, Byrne says, "I can't look at it with an objective eye. I see the mistakes where I feel like, oh, that's a little forced, or that lyric could have been better. I'm looking at it with a critical eye. At the same time, I feel like it's pretty much holds up. It's funny how everything the movie talks about, the way the computer industry and landscapes of cities and towns are all changing, are still happening. And I've been going on since the movie was made, so it's nice to see that it doesn't seem that dated." There's a very unique atmosphere this film has, where it's almost uncanny. The towns are just like any other small town in the southern United States, but there is something slightly off-kilter about the place where it gives you a slight sense of unease, but also sparks your imagination, which we have established was intentional. The film is also very quickly paced, with Byrne being your tour guide, guiding you from scene to scene with his iconic red 1985 Chrysler LeBaron as an observer cruising the world of this fictional small town of Virgil, Texas. I can't find any interviews of why he used this specific model, but I think it just fits the setting and aesthetics of the film perfectly. The model being a common car for tourists to be used while traveling, and the red fitting well with the Talking Heads brand and image. When asked what filmmakers inspired his style in an interview, David said, "Oh yeah, lots of people, lots of expected points of reference. The way Hitchcock would storyboard things out, that was just huge, and the imagery of Fellini and a lot of other European directors was amazing. The kind of narrative that didn't seem to be a narrative in a lot of Atlan movies. I was a big fan of experimental cinema. Bruce Conner, these psychedelic films, and things which rethought what you could do with a film, what the medium could be about. All these things were really wonderful. The film was partially inspired by Iroli, Missouri's Merman, the Florida, a documentary about life and the happenings of the small town of Vernon, Florida. Yes, I remember seeing that. I might have shown that to the writers I remember showing the Chris Marker's movie, Saying So Learn, to the writers. I was working with Steven Tabolowski and Beth Henney, which seems like a bit of a stretch. I mean, I love the movie, but one of the things I thought might be inspirational to them was how he was talking all these things that he liked, and then he wrote a story about it using the framework of letters that were being exchanged, and you would hear the letters being read about these images. It just made me think there's a lot of ways to make a thread that goes through something that helps engage us, and it doesn't have to follow the same rules all the time. This mockumentary style would lend itself very well to the strange and bizarre imagery of the film, and add a sense of authenticity to the film's world, and make it seem like these people were real, despite the larger-than-life spectacle of the musical numbers and general uneasiness of the setting. When asked about a big musical number at the town celebration, Byrne said, "Oh, that was Barbara Lynn. That was her idea. Really wonderful. She was the production designer. She'd done a film with Diane Keaton called Heaven. I really liked the way it looked. I met with her. There was lots of pictures and books and architecture books and all kinds of things that were shared in interest. I thought, yeah, we have some sensibilities in common. For that setup, she proposed using the material called Xylon, which is this configured fiberglass. People used it for their back porches. The sun can't quite go through, but it creates this kind of greenish glow. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's cheap. And it's this cheap. Get it off the shelf. Hardware store kind of stuff. I don't know what her next project was, but shortly after that, she was the production designer on Batman Forever. Wow, you're really going to build some stuff. It was really important that it would be in the middle of a field, and you don't see all the other paraphernalia around it. It's just that this kind of box in the middle of a field. It was actually Jonathan Demme who encouraged David to make this directorial debut. Jonathan Demme was very much a cheerleader. He was very helpful. His producers at the time, Gary Ghostman, was super supportive during the developing process, and Jonathan would look at what I was doing. It was kind of outside his wheelhouse, the things I was doing, but he offered really good advice. One of the things I remember he said was, you need a clock. He didn't mean a clock on the wall. He meant something like a chronological thing that was something in the future in this film. It becomes the celebration of specialness in the talent show. So people at the beginning of the film would say, in 2 weeks there was going to be a talent show. Then you'd see someone and they're going, we're getting ready for the talent show. So there's this thing ticking, and it pulls you through a little bit. You know you're heading towards something. Early on in the video, I mentioned that this film is very similar to Napoleon Dynamite. The rule of setting and offbeat characters seem to have been cut from the same cloth. They both portray the mundanity of small-town America, but instead of pointing their nose and mocking the subjects, they instead choose to laugh alongside them and humanize their personal struggles. Both even end with a talent show to show off the town's amazing talents. In his essay, People Like Us, David Byrne's True Stories as a Search of Autistic Connection, Luis Antonio Franco writes, Byrne was concerned with trying to find people to relate to, or at the very least things and people to which he could relate. Some part of him must have identified with the eccentric people found, their stories inspiring, reassuring, familiar to some degree. His collecting might have been just as much self-soothing as its curiosity. I use this quote because I think it demonstrates what is so special about this film. It's about trying to find the purest essence of America and reaching out a hand to genuinely make a connection with others. True Stories released to theaters at a box office of $2.1 million, barely making its budget, like I've already said. When asked if he would ever direct another film, Byrne said, I did a mockumentary in Brazil, a very different experience to doing something that's scripted, but again, I enjoyed it immensely. In the years since its initial box office disappointment, it has gained a cult following with frequent airings on TV. Metal buildings are the dream that modern architects have at the beginning of the century, and it's finally come true, but they themselves don't realize it. That's because it doesn't take on an architect to build a metal building. You just ordered them out of a catalog, comes with a bunch of guys who put it together in a couple of days, maybe a week, and there you go. You're all set, go into the business. Just slap a sign out front. The film was made as a genuine, authentic way to make connections. It has become a warm welcome to millions who connected to the message. So if you find yourself in the middle of nowhere in some rural small town, far away from the noise and crazy of city life, don't forget to take the time to reach out to someone. You might make that connection.